He never believed that life could unravel in the blink of an eye, but the moment he lost all feeling from the waist down, he thought every dream he had nurtured since childhood would vanish forever. Nobody foresaw how a single reckless driver on a quiet Texas road would slam into his car and steal his ability to walk. His name was Travis, and he had grown up with music in his heart, always practicing guitar with a smile, always daydreaming about performing on stage for cheering crowds. He wanted to believe his passion was strong enough to carry him through any obstacle, but after the accident, Travis felt that all possibilities had slipped out of reach. The doctors did their best to repair the damage to his spine, but the trauma left him in a wheelchair with little hope of recovery. He spent weeks in the hospital, staring at the ceiling and replaying the collision in his mind, trying to figure out if there was any way he could have avoided that oncoming vehicle. His friends visited, but he only gave them distant nods. Family members tried encouraging him with stories of people who had adapted and found new ways to live, yet he sank deeper into despair. The day he was discharged, he rolled out of those hospital doors feeling as though his future had been reduced to a dead end. The small town in Texas where he lived had limited resources for people with disabilities, so he faced a world of physical barriers at almost every turn. Getting up the steps to his own front porch was a struggle because he had no ramp. Inside, furniture seemed to block every pathway. He tried calling rehab facilities, but waiting lists stretched for months. Each phone call ended with him swallowing his frustration, wishing life had a rewind button. He felt a raw helplessness that went deeper than physical pain, so he withdrew from everyone who tried to help. But Chuck Norris was in town for a charitable event aimed at raising funds for local youth sports programs. He had heard rumors about a young man who once had big ambitions but now sat alone behind closed doors, refusing to see visitors unless absolutely necessary. Someone at the community center mentioned Travis's name. Chuck didn't know him personally, but the story stuck in his mind because he had met many people in crisis, yet this seemed particularly heartbreaking. Chuck felt a pull toward Travis's plight, sensing that if no one acted soon, the young man might lock himself in a world of resentment and depression. Therefore, Chuck decided to make a personal visit. Travis had no clue who was knocking at his door that afternoon. He almost ignored the knock altogether, but a persistent voice called out, "Travis, I'd like to speak with you." The voice was calm but firm. Travis reluctantly wheeled himself to the door and opened it. He looked up to see Chuck Norris standing on his porch, arms relaxed at his sides. Travis blinked, half thinking it must be a prank or a bizarre dream. Chuck greeted him warmly, explained he had heard about the accident, and asked if he could come in. Travis hesitated, face flushing with embarrassment because the house was cluttered, and he knew moving around in that wheelchair was no simple feat. Chuck didn't flinch at the cramped space. He stepped around the scattered furniture, gently moving a chair to create a path. Travis wanted to close the door on him, but Chuck's gaze radiated kindness, and it crumbled Travis's defensive shell. They sat in the living room, though Travis remained in his wheelchair, fidgeting. Chuck broke the tension by asking about Travis's passion for music. Travis shrugged, saying it was all in the past. Chuck cocked his head, saying that if the desire for music still existed in Travis's heart, maybe it wasn't over at all. Travis huffed, bitterness flashing in his eyes because he thought Chuck was just spouting meaningless optimism. Chuck listened carefully, letting Travis vent about how his muscles didn't respond, how even daily tasks felt impossible, and how he couldn't imagine returning to the life he once had. He admitted that the guitar he used to treasure now sat in its case, untouched, because the physical effort to hold it properly or balance it on his lap seemed daunting. Chuck didn't minimize those struggles. He nodded in understanding, yet he said he believed Travis could find a new path if he embraced adaptive strategies. Travis scoffed, claiming that was easier said than done. But Chuck revealed he had spent time working with different charities and athletic organizations devoted to people with disabilities. He had witnessed individuals with various impairments go on to excel in sports and arts by employing specialized techniques. Travis listened warily, though something flickered in his eyes at the mention of real success stories. Chuck offered to help him find solutions, saying that if Travis was willing to put in the work, Chuck would do everything possible to connect him with the right people. Travis wanted to dismiss the idea, but a small seed of curiosity took root. He found himself agreeing to let Chuck introduce him to someone at a nearby rehab center with a music therapy program. Chuck left with a promise to return in a couple of days. That night, Travis stared at the closed guitar case in his bedroom, remembering how proud he felt playing local gigs. He remembered the rush of applause, the sense of belonging. He almost convinced himself to open the case, but fear of failing in his new condition caused him to recoil. He turned off the lights and tried to forget about it. Chuck stayed true to his word and arrived 2 days later with a friend named Rick, who specialized in adaptive equipment. Rick walked in with a gentle smile and a bag full of bizarre-looking gadgets. Travis tensed at first, suspecting this was just another demonstration of false hope, but Rick patiently explained that playing guitar from a wheelchair was entirely possible with some modifications. He pulled out a slanted stand designed to support the instrument at a comfortable angle, plus straps and cushions that helped secure the guitar. Travis watched skeptically. Rick coaxed him to give it a try. It wasn't graceful at first. Travis struggled to maneuver his upper body in the wheelchair, struggling to position his hands properly. He felt pain in his spine if he twisted too fast. Rick and Chuck hovered nearby, offering steady support, adjusting straps, encouraging him to keep going. His fingers felt stiff from disuse, and he fumbled over basic chords. A wave of shame washed over him, but Chuck reminded him that everyone stumbles at the beginning. Travis frowned, but he took a breath and strummed a simple progression. The sound was shaky, but it was music. Something lit up in him, like a glowing ember inside a pile of ash. After Rick left, Chuck stayed behind to talk more. Travis admitted he felt a small thrill but doubted he could ever play with the same fire as before. Chuck told him that doubts would devour him if he let them, but if he placed trust in the process, day by day he might discover a new version of that fire. Travis closed his eyes, tears threatening, but he clenched his jaw and nodded. He wasn't fully ready to commit, yet Chuck's unwavering confidence made him curious. Over the next few weeks, Chuck returned regularly, sometimes bringing volunteer physical therapists who helped Travis with upper body exercises. The house, once a place of gloom, began to resemble a mini rehab center. Travis found it annoying at times, complaining that it reminded him of the hospital. But Chuck insisted that building strength was crucial for playing guitar at a serious level. Therefore Travis grudgingly tried the exercises, feeling the burn in his arms and shoulders, cursing under his breath when his muscles trembled. Chuck, always calm, guided him to push through those moments. Slowly Travis gained better control over his posture and discovered ways to shift in the wheelchair without pulling on his lower back. He started feeling the faintest glimmer of pride. Once he managed a half-hour of uninterrupted practice without dropping his pick, he actually smiled. Chuck noticed that spark and told him to hold on to it. Word spread around town that Chuck Norris was visiting Travis's place. Neighbors found it peculiar. Some tried to approach Travis, but he still preferred privacy, especially when the therapy sessions left him exhausted. But Chuck recognized that Travis needed a bigger community to cheer him on, so he enlisted local volunteers to build a proper ramp for Travis's front porch. One weekend, a small group of men arrived with lumber and tools, hammering away in the Texas sun until Travis had a secure, sturdy path from his driveway to his door. Watching them work gave Travis an odd sense of gratitude and discomfort. He had always been independent, never wanting handouts. But Chuck calmly explained that accepting help wasn't weakness. Travis let that sink in. Soon after the ramp was completed, Chuck arranged for Travis to visit a specialized music therapy program in Austin. Travis was nervous about traveling, worried about the logistics of the wheelchair, lodging, and people staring. Chuck accompanied him, ensuring that every detail was handled. At the facility, Travis met artists and musicians with a variety of disabilities, some missing limbs, some dealing with degenerative diseases, yet still performing with joy and confidence. He watched a young woman without arms play the piano using only her feet, and tears threatened to spill because it shattered the notion that he alone had it hard. Then he met a man who had once lost partial use of his hands but had learned a new picking technique on the guitar that sounded incredible. Travis listened, stunned, as the man tore through a complex blues riff. Therefore, Travis's worldview cracked open. He realized that if these people could make music despite facing barriers, maybe his circumstances didn't have to end his passion. After the demonstration, a therapist named Marla approached him, praising his courage for coming. She invited him to try out some adaptive picks and splints designed for those with limited hand mobility. Travis hesitated, worried he would embarrass himself. But Chuck rested a reassuring hand on his shoulder, reminding him that every step forward required courage. Travis took a breath and let Marla attach a supportive brace around his wrist, which helped keep his strumming hand stable. The difference was startling. He found it easier to maintain consistent strumming without straining his wrist or losing grip. Hearing the clear notes ring out, he experienced a rush he hadn't felt in ages. He actually laughed in surprise. Chuck grinned, seeing Travis's spirit ignite. The session ended with Marla encouraging Travis to sign up for a weekend workshop focusing on adaptive guitar techniques, but Travis worried about the cost. Chuck brushed off the concern, saying he would handle the financial part through some connections in the local charity circuit. Travis blushed, feeling that old stubbornness about not accepting handouts. Chuck responded that this wasn't about charity. It was about investing in Travis's future. Travis swallowed hard, eventually nodding. He realized Chuck's sincerity was genuine, not pity. So he agreed. Returning home, Travis felt an unfamiliar excitement. He told Chuck he wanted to commit to practicing daily, hoping to become a fraction of the musician he once was. Chuck corrected him, saying that maybe he could become an even better musician if he embraced new methods. That statement lingered in Travis's mind as he resumed his exercises. Each day he tackled a basic routine: upper body strengthening, finger dexterity drills, short jam sessions with adaptive gear. It was grueling. His back sometimes ached, and his frustration flared whenever he hit a plateau. But Chuck showed up at the door whenever Travis seemed ready to quit, reminding him why he started. They formed a small routine. Chuck would show up, they would talk about goals, Travis would demonstrate a new technique he had been working on, and Chuck would offer suggestions or tips he'd learned from the mentors they had met. Sometimes Chuck just listened, giving Travis the chance to vent. Whenever Travis seemed stuck, Chuck pointed him toward a resource or a person who had overcome a similar hurdle. Travis learned to value collaboration more than his own pride. Meanwhile, local folks started noticing a change in Travis. He didn't hide behind closed doors as much. He even ventured out to watch a few small musical performances in town, carefully navigating his wheelchair over uneven sidewalks. He had awkward stumbles, almost tipping over once, but he managed. Each outing felt like a personal victory over the fear that had kept him trapped. One evening, Chuck mentioned that a local community center was hosting an inclusive sports clinic for people with disabilities. Travis dismissed the idea, insisting he had no interest in sports. But Chuck suggested he just give it a look, maybe talk to the wheelchair basketball coach, or meet the staff who specialized in adaptive recreation. Travis reluctantly agreed, thinking it would be a quick visit. But at the event he met participants from all walks of life, each defying expectations in unique ways. He even ended up shooting a few hoops from his wheelchair, discovering a surprising surge of exhilaration when the ball swished through the net. The clinic organizers suggested he join them regularly, but Travis held back, explaining his main passion was music. They nodded, explaining that physical exercise could also boost his stamina for playing guitar. That lingered in Travis's thoughts. A few days later, he decided to drop by again, trying to keep up with the laughter and sweat of wheelchair basketball drills. He wasn't a natural, but he felt blood pumping in his arms, reminding him that he was alive and capable of growth. All of this built a strong foundation for Travis's self-esteem. His confidence in controlling the wheelchair improved, which translated into easier navigation at home, plus better posture for playing guitar. Chuck noticed how Travis's personality slowly revived, that old spark of humor and warmth returning to his voice. Travis admitted that he had started dreaming about performing again, though the idea of stepping on stage in a wheelchair still felt daunting. Chuck assured him that if that day came, the wheelchair wouldn't matter, only the music. Travis practiced harder, even writing a couple of new songs, pouring his emotions into lyrics about resilience and second chances. He realized that while he was physically changed, his soul still craved expression, and music was his vessel for that. One afternoon, Chuck arrived with a surprise visitor, a local musician named Caleb who had lost a leg in an accident yet continued to tour nationally. Caleb rolled in on a prosthetic, carrying his electric guitar, sporting a grin. Travis was starstruck because he recognized Caleb from a regional music festival. Caleb asked if Travis was up for a jam session. Travis felt nerves twist in his stomach but agreed. They set up their guitars, carefully positioning Travis's adaptive stand. Chuck watched from the side, arms folded, a proud look on his face. The first few minutes were tense because Travis worried about messing up in front of a pro. But Caleb played a simple blues progression, nodding for Travis to join. Tentatively, Travis added a melody line. It sounded raw, but the synergy felt amazing. They built the groove, layering chords and improvisations. Sweat beaded on Travis's forehead from the effort of keeping his hands steady, but the thrill of making live music overcame all hesitation. They ended with a flourish, and Caleb clapped him on the shoulder, praising his skill. Travis's eyes brimmed with emotion because he couldn't believe he had just jammed with a musician he admired. Caleb told him not to stop there, that the world needed to hear the perspective of someone who refused to let disability define him. That push stuck with Travis for days. He decided he wanted to test himself further by registering for the upcoming workshop in Austin. Chuck offered to drive him, help him through the trip. Travis accepted, determined to prove he could handle traveling independently. They set off early on a Saturday, with Travis double-checking that he had his guitar, adaptive gear, and a small duffel bag. The drive took a few hours, and Travis found himself reflecting on how different his mindset was compared to just a couple of months before. He still had fear lurking in the back of his mind, but he also had hope. That workshop turned out to be a turning point. Travis immersed himself among other aspiring musicians with disabilities, all learning creative ways to elevate their craft. The instructors demonstrated advanced picking techniques, specialized harnesses, and digital tools for mixing. Travis discovered a new perspective on artistry, realizing that limitations could spark fresh innovations in sound. He practiced tirelessly, ignoring the ache in his arms. By the second day, he was playing a short segment of one of his original songs in front of the group. Applause erupted, and Travis felt like electricity was surging through his veins. When he finished, he glanced over to see Chuck in the back, smiling like a proud teacher. The final night of the workshop featured an open mic style performance. Travis hesitated, thinking he wasn't ready for a real audience yet. But Chuck reminded him that fear would always be there if he gave it power. So Travis took a leap of faith, rolling onto the small stage, plugging in his guitar, and announcing he would play an original piece. Hands shaking, he strummed the opening chords. He stumbled at first, but forced himself to breathe and press forward. The lyrics poured out, raw and honest, capturing the pain of his accident, the despair, and the fragile rebirth of hope. The crowd sat transfixed. When he struck the final chord, an eruption of cheers and whistles filled the room. A wave of relief and pride crashed into Travis. He realized in that moment that the wheelchair no longer felt like a prison. It felt like a vantage point from which he could see life differently and share that view through his music. Back at the hotel, Travis found Chuck waiting in the lobby. Travis stammered his gratitude, trying to express how Chuck had pulled him from the brink of darkness. Chuck told him that he had done the real work by daring to believe in possibilities. They parted ways to rest, but Travis hardly slept. His mind buzzed with new dreams of performing in front of bigger crowds. When they returned home, Travis felt unstoppable. He was still physically limited, but he had tasted the thrill of performing again. Chuck shifted his role slightly, letting Travis become more independent. Travis started building a daily schedule for practice, physical exercise, and personal errands. He installed a few more adaptive modifications around the house, ensuring he could reach items in the kitchen without straining. He regained enough upper body strength to transfer himself from the wheelchair to the couch without assistance. Friends noticed his transformation. He even joined the wheelchair basketball group occasionally, not to become a star athlete, but to maintain fitness and relish the camaraderie. Chuck visited less often because he sensed Travis could stand on his own. However, whenever Travis had a setback, like a painful muscle spasm or a frustrating jam session, Chuck was a phone call away. Travis discovered that occasional setbacks were part of the process. He refused to let them derail his progress. A highlight came when the local community center announced a music fundraiser event. Some suggested that Travis should perform to inspire the community. Fear punched him in the gut again, but he remembered the applause in Austin. He decided to do it, telling Chuck he needed some help with stage setup. Chuck nodded, volunteering to gather a small volunteer crew to ensure the stage was wheelchair accessible. On the night of the event, Travis sat backstage, heart pounding in his chest. He peeked around the curtain to see a decent crowd, including neighbors who once pitied him. He felt a flicker of doubt. But Chuck caught his eye, nodded firmly, and Travis exhaled. This was his moment to show people that disability didn't equate to defeat. He rolled onto the stage when his name was announced, guitar resting on the modified stand. Lights shone on him, and for a split second, he recalled the anguish he felt in that hospital bed. But he placed his hand on the strings, started playing the opening riff of the song he had practiced for weeks, and the music carried him beyond fear. His voice carried across the silent auditorium. Some in the crowd had tears in their eyes as they watched Travis pour his soul into each note. By the final chord, the applause shook the walls, with Chuck leading a standing ovation. Travis blinked back tears, glancing down at his wheelchair, then at the cheering faces. He bowed his head in gratitude. That performance led to bigger invitations. A local radio station heard about Travis's story and invited him to talk about his journey, plus play a live acoustic set on air. He accepted, feeling both nervous and excited. During the interview, he spoke candidly about the accident, admitting he once felt as though life was over. But he emphasized how Chuck's unwavering support and the discovery of adaptive methods had reignited his dreams. He then played a short, poignant piece, leaving the radio hosts awestruck. One of them remarked that Travis's story might encourage others who felt trapped by their circumstances. Calls flooded the station with messages of encouragement and gratitude. Travis returned home that day more inspired than ever, seeing that his music could uplift others. Chuck paid him a visit that evening, congratulating him on the radio's success. Travis asked how he could ever repay him for the faith and dedication he had shown. Chuck replied that the best reward would be if Travis kept pushing boundaries, using his renewed spirit to help other people facing hardships. Travis nodded, realizing that his story could become a beacon for others in despair. With Chuck's guidance, Travis soon embarked on small motivational talks at rehab centers. He rolled in with his guitar, shared pieces of his journey, and played a few songs to demonstrate what was possible with determination. Patients listened with wide eyes. Some asked detailed questions about the adaptive gear, while others simply wanted to hear how he overcame the mental barriers. Travis spoke honestly about the dark place he had been in, the anger and helplessness, and how one person's belief in him changed everything. He admitted that the shift didn't happen overnight. But he urged them to take small steps forward, to remain open to solutions instead of shutting out hope. Eventually, Travis explored the idea of forming a local band that included members of varying abilities. He gathered a drummer who used a prosthetic arm, a keyboardist who experienced partial hearing loss, and another guitarist who had nerve damage in his hands. Their jam sessions were full of experimentation, adjusting tempos, customizing equipment. The synergy was electrifying, each member contributing unique ideas, each refusing to let physical constraints limit their creativity. Chuck attended their first informal showcase, cheering from a corner of the makeshift venue. The crowd was modest, but the energy soared. People witnessed a group of musicians who had turned adversity into fuel for art. Travis's mother approached him afterward with tears in her eyes, whispering that she had feared he would never find happiness again. He hugged her, feeling that old sorrow at everything they'd lost, but also brimming with gratitude for how far he had come. Over time, Travis's band started performing at small festivals in the region, drawing local media attention for their inspiring story. Travis made sure to highlight the importance of supportive communities, praising Chuck at every interview. Some journalists tried sensationalizing the Chuck Norris angle, but Chuck gently redirected the spotlight to Travis and his bandmates, insisting that he only played a small part. Travis continued refining his craft, taking online courses to expand his musical knowledge. He also delved into songwriting with a deeper purpose, penning lyrics about the universal longing for hope. Each new composition felt like a personal victory over the wheelchair. By now, that wheelchair wasn't a symbol of loss but a vessel that carried him across new frontiers. He still experienced emotional lows sometimes, especially when physical pain flared or a performance didn't go as planned. But Chuck reminded him that even the strongest fighter faces setbacks. The key was to keep moving forward. Travis listened, nodding, internalizing that truth. Time slid by in a blur of music, therapy sessions, and blossoming self-discovery. Travis received an invitation to play at a well-known music festival that celebrated artists with disabilities. Performers from across the country would gather, showcasing everything from rock bands to classical ensembles. Accepting the invitation felt like stepping onto a dream stage he never thought he'd see again. On the day of the festival, Travis and his band arrived to find the venue bustling with energy. Colorful banners hung overhead, crowds rolled in, some in wheelchairs, some with service dogs, some carrying crutches. The atmosphere was electric with possibility. Chuck joined Travis backstage, letting him know how proud he was. Travis inhaled deeply, remembering the night he spent alone in his house, believing the wheelchair spelled the end of all his hopes. Now he stood on the threshold of a major performance, heart thumping with anticipation instead of dread. Their turn came, and the band took the stage amid supportive cheers. The lights glowed bright, amplifiers hummed, and Travis felt every nerve tingling. He adjusted the guitar on his stand, catching Chuck's reassuring nod from side stage. Then the drummer counted off, and they launched into a vibrant, uplifting song. The audience's applause merged with the music, creating a wave of communal joy. Travis's vocals rang out strong, the lyrics speaking of turning heartbreak into a new beginning. The crowd swayed and clapped. Some wiped away tears. When the final chord reverberated, the cheers roared loud enough to rattle the rafters. Travis gazed out over the crowd, stunned at how far he had traveled from that hospital bed. The wheelchair no longer defined his story. The applause rolled on, and Chuck stepped on stage to give Travis a gentle salute. Travis lifted his guitar in triumph. After the set, fans approached for autographs, thanking the band for showing them what could be achieved despite physical barriers. Travis stayed humble, crediting those who had helped him see beyond his own despair. Chuck lingered in the background, observing how Travis interacted with fans, noticing the light in his eyes that had once been extinguished. That night, when the festival ended, Travis wheeled over to Chuck, pulling him aside. He said he was ready to pass on all that he had learned to others and asked if Chuck could link him up with additional outreach programs. Chuck agreed wholeheartedly, suggesting that together they might create an ongoing initiative to encourage people facing hardships. Travis beamed, feeling a surge of excitement for what lay ahead. Therefore, their partnership evolved. Travis became an ambassador for adaptive music education, occasionally traveling with Chuck to speak at community centers or charity events. They emphasized the message that while the body might have limitations, the human spirit can be boundless when given the right support. Travis found purpose in these talks, enjoying the spark of hope that lit up in listeners' eyes. Back in Texas, his hometown began to see him as more than just a tragedy. He received standing ovations whenever he performed locally. The ramp that volunteers built on his porch felt like a symbol of the path Chuck had helped him construct. He kept adding to it metaphorically, bridging the gap between his old dreams and new realities. Even the wheelchair basketball team cheered him on, proud to see one of their own pushing boundaries in the music scene. Over time, Travis's discography grew, including a few recorded tracks that gained modest traction online. He might not have soared to superstardom, but that no longer mattered. He found fulfillment in living authentically and inspiring others. Chuck would call him every so often, checking in to see if he needed anything or if he'd discovered new ways to adapt. Travis always smiled at those calls, realizing how different life might have been if Chuck hadn't knocked on his door. One evening, after another successful local show, Travis sat in his living room, guitar resting against his wheelchair. The lights were low, and a gentle hush filled the space. He reflected on the heartbreak he once felt, the nights he had spent believing his dream was gone. Tears welled up at how drastically everything had changed since then. He found the phone number of a new friend who had recently experienced a disabling accident. Travis dialed it, wanting to offer support and share resources, hoping to become the same kind of catalyst that Chuck was for him. That realization that he could now help someone else rediscover hope felt like the ultimate testament to how far he had come. Whenever Chuck stopped by, the conversation was lighter. They laughed about Travis's performance mishaps, planned future events, and teased each other about the next big leap Travis might take. Travis even toyed with the idea of forming a traveling ensemble to play at rehab centers nationwide. Chuck encouraged him, saying the sky was the limit if he stayed persistent. Each time Travis thanked him, Chuck repeated that Travis had done the real heavy lifting. But Travis knew better. He knew that sometimes a single guiding voice was all it took to steer a lost soul back toward purpose. Eventually, Travis gained enough momentum to schedule a regional tour with his band, focusing on venues that embraced accessibility. They loaded up a van with ramps and gear, determined to make every show possible for audience members with disabilities. Chuck joined them for part of the journey, observing how natural Travis looked rolling onto stage night after night, telling his story, belting out songs that resonated with anyone who ever felt hopeless. The final concert of that tour took place in a mid-sized arena. The crowd was the largest Travis had ever played for. Cameras flashed, the energy soared, and as the band hit their final note, thunderous applause shook the building. Travis closed his eyes, recalling the day he first saw Chuck Norris standing on his cluttered porch. He felt a surge of gratitude so powerful that his voice quivered when he addressed the audience at the end. He told them that if anyone out there had given up on a dream, they could still find a path forward, no matter how impossible it seemed. He dedicated the last song to Chuck, calling him the guardian angel who had refused to let him drown in despair. Chuck stood backstage with watery eyes, though he tried to hide it with a gentle smile. When Travis rolled backstage after the encore, Chuck took a moment to shake his hand, saying that the standing ovation was well-deserved. Travis responded that the real standing ovation belonged to everyone who overcame obstacles society deemed insurmountable. Chuck nodded, proud to see how Travis had embraced not just his own dream, but the responsibility to lift others as well. They left that arena, hearts brimming with possibility, knowing that countless new doors had opened. Travis felt unstoppable, not because his body had magically healed, but because he had discovered that genuine healing comes from within, fueled by perseverance, and guided by unwavering support. His wheelchair squeaked as he navigated the backstage corridor, but every squeak reminded him that he was still moving forward, still chasing the music that made him feel alive. In the days that followed, Travis continued forging alliances with different organizations, always crediting Chuck for sparking his journey. Chuck, in turn, shared Travis's music whenever he appeared at charity functions, using Travis's story to illustrate the power of refusing to accept limitations. Letters and emails poured in, from wounded veterans, from people battling chronic illnesses, from teenagers coping with sudden injuries. They all expressed gratitude for seeing that disability did not mean an end. Travis read them with humility, replying whenever possible, sometimes inviting them to come watch his band or to connect with local resources. He understood that isolation was the real enemy, so he tried to shine a light into anyone's darkness if he could. His mother, once terrified that her son might never find happiness, witnessed him transform into a role model for others. She kept a framed photo of Travis on stage at the Austin workshop, reminding herself daily that hope could blossom in the most unexpected places. Occasionally, Travis would have nightmares about the car accident, waking up in a cold sweat. But he'd roll over, notice his guitar leaning against the wall, and remember that Chuck told him adversity could never defeat a determined soul. That single thought steadied his nerves. He grasped that nightmares might revisit, but they no longer defined him. Finally, on a tranquil evening back in Texas, Travis found himself alone in the living room, softly strumming an original ballad. The ramp that used to symbolize his helplessness now felt like a door to freedom. Chuck had just left after sharing a cup of coffee and trading stories about future charity plans. Travis closed his eyes, letting the final chord of his song echo. A surge of gratitude overwhelmed him. He realized the journey wasn't about returning to who he was before, but about discovering who he could become after everything changed. He thought about all the people out there who believed their dreams were overdue to a diagnosis, an injury, or a twist of fate, and he vowed to keep the music alive for their sake. He thought about how Chuck taught him that even the most devastating barriers can become catalysts for transformation if you refuse to surrender. Travis gently placed the guitar aside, gazing at the moonlit window. He whispered a promise to himself that he would keep pushing boundaries, keep inspiring, keep remembering the day Chuck Norris stepped in and ignited the belief that nothing was truly ruined